Now that it's almost winter, I think it's safe to say this year was a great one for horror, of all types. Sequels that pleasantly surprised us with how great they ended up being, and original films that were a breath of fresh air in a sea of existing IPs, including, an outrageous body horror movie about birthing a younger you from your old body. Let's be real, an indie horror film with Demi Moore becoming a pop culture phenomenon was not on my 2024 bingo card. What's even more interesting is that when it was originally released, and I went to see it initially, my local AMC theater only had one single showing on a Saturday, and it was after 9 p.m. But within a week or two of its release, it seems like everyone was talking about it. Almost 2 months later, we are still talking and sharing memes about this movie online. As it's obvious, we are all sort of connected by the shared grotesque trauma this movie put us through. This film came out of left field, and it was definitely a home run, be it a weird one. In case you haven't heard of it, The Substance is a horror film starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, and directed by Coralie Farja, and it's now streaming on Mubi. It's centered around a fitness television star named Elizabeth, who is fired literally as soon as she turns 50 years old, despite clearly still being objectively fit and pretty. She discovers this secret experimental treatment called The Substance that makes you a fresh, new, younger, more beautiful body. Of course, it's not that easy, as her life takes an even darker turn for the worse as she navigates two bodies. As you might be able to tell, this movie deals with the fear of aging and loss of beauty that is commonly associated with the passage of time. It isn't a new topic in film, but The Substance does do a few things differently that helps catapult it into the spotlight. This movie sure is a lot at times. Okay, well, most of its runtime. The visuals, sound design, and use of special effects can make it an uncomfortable watch for some. How did something so extreme and opposite of the subtle, high art horror that's been trending these past few years become what some consider the best horror film of the year? Do these over-the-top elements, including the amount of seemingly endless zoom-ins on butts and shocking, unexpected gore, take away from the overall message and quality? I mean, there were plenty of accounts of viewers walking right out of the theater when watching this film, so it's proven not to be everyone's cup of tea. It's different, alright, but is that a good thing? Well, let's get right into what pumps this movie up. If you end up liking this video and want to see more like this, please like and subscribe. Thanks. First things first, would I recommend this film? Yes, definitely. If you do go see it though, please do it with an open mind and an empty stomach. If body horror triggers you, maybe skip this one, or at least the last half hour of the film. I like The Substance because it is unapologetically a wild ride. It has amazing performances by Moore, Qualley, and honestly Dennis Quaid as he represents the literal manifestation of the male gaze. We feel for the main character as she battles wanting others to accept her and wanting to accept herself. With this theme and lack of subtlety, The Substance could have easily become a train wreck, but it works. The film is campy without being corny, and gross without feeling gratuitous, to me at least, and I'll get more into that later. The loss of one's youth and beauty is a horror tale as old as time, for women especially. It is instilled in women at an absurdly young age that outer beauty is all important, and we must keep up a certain trendy body shape or makeup style that is decided by whoever. In our society, we sometimes rely on makeup to cover imperfections or emulate things like flushed cheeks and brighter eyes with blush and mascara. As a kid, it was already ingrained in me that makeup was a seemingly necessary part of our lives.
So I have to look as pretty as they do.
With eyeshadow, lipstick, and even a light-up mirror.
You look gorgeous.
It is offered as a way for us to be prettier, so then you start believing that without it, you aren't even presentable. In our most vulnerable time, it's so easy for us to develop an unhealthy relationship with our looks. I want to be clear that there is nothing wrong with liking makeup, but I feel like it shouldn't be treated as a requirement, especially since men aren't expected to do the same. Beauty is commonly associated with youth, and over time, our skin and bodies naturally give way to certain changes. Unfortunately, many aspects of the media and pop culture seemingly shame us into not wanting to age. In the era of TikTok and Instagram, kids and teens are being influenced to buy overpriced skincare to prevent signs of aging that they haven't even had time to experience yet. As adults, we have access to cosmetic procedures that minimize wrinkles, plump lips, and suck fat out of our cheeks. And we are constantly seeing celebrities and sometimes our role models undergo procedures like this to stay young looking. In Hollywood, it's not uncommon to see rich, older men with much younger women, showcasing the theory that as women age, they lose their value, and sadly, some women feel the need to alter their appearance just to compete with some fresh faces. We are taught through the media that without beauty and youth, we are nothing.
Happy birthday.
So naturally, there is a market for reversing the aging process any way we know how. And again, I have nothing against those who want to have cosmetic surgery or anything like that, as long as it's under their own volition. There's nothing wrong with feeling good about yourself. I just believe it shouldn't be expected of us to maintain these impossible standards with the fear of becoming less desirable or less accepted in society. Also, men can definitely feel this way as well. It's just more common for women to feel this pressure throughout their lives. Now, with all this background of the themes and message behind the film, we know The Substance is quite clearly showcasing the negative effects of societal pressure and telling the audience that we should be accepting of ourselves and how we look, even as we age. Like I said earlier, the fear of losing one's youth and beauty is a common one in real life, just as common as it is depicted in film. There are a plethora of movies about this topic, and horror is no exception. Some other modern horror movies you might know with similar themes are X and The Neon Demon. In X, an older woman's jealousy of a few young, sexually active guests drives her to violence. In The Neon Demon, a new girl in town becomes the most desired model in Los Angeles, with her youthful innocence and pure untouched form seemingly entrancing people. Now, when watching The Substance, one particular movie kept coming to mind. One of my favorite films of all time is the 90s black comedy, horror-adjacent cult classic Death Becomes Her. No, it's not that critically acclaimed, but it's theatrical and funny, and honestly a must-watch for me during Halloween season. The Substance and Death Becomes Her have a lot of similarities. In terms of the vibe, both are quite over the top. For their plots, both follow older women who make questionable and regrettable choices to gain back youthful beauty. In case you don't know about this classic movie, at its most basic, it revolves around a love triangle that is made even more complicated when the women are given a supernatural potion that makes them younger looking and basically immortal. Meryl Streep plays Madeline, a washed-out movie star who is threatened with losing her husband to an old flame that now somehow looks 20 years younger. In The Substance, Elizabeth is fired from her TV show for simply turning 50 years old, with the studio immediately looking for a replacement as young as 18 years old.
We need her young. We need her hot. We need her now.
Both Elizabeth and Madeline have developed an unhealthy obsession with their looks and desire to stop aging. Both women are rich and famous and make a drastic, life-changing decision in order to keep something they are in danger of losing. Elizabeth with her career and Madeline with her love life. Another big similarity I noticed is that the users of both the immortal potion and the substance suffer the consequences of believing you are invincible when you are young and quote-unquote beautiful, and their lives quickly go downhill after taking these treatments. Before getting the potion, Madeline is even told,
"Take care of yourself,"
by the mysterious woman who gives it to her. At the end of Elizabeth's last show and Sue's first show, she tells the audience,
"Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself."
Something neither version of her follows. Both protagonists prioritize their looks over their well-being. These comparisons are not meant to take away from the success or originality of The Substance at all, just to provide context to how these themes were previously portrayed in the media, including film. Honestly, the story of a woman risking her life by taking an experimental foreign substance to be young and pretty again is not too far off from what we see happen in real life. So, The Substance does something special, especially in this day and age where high art, at times sophisticated horror seems to reign supreme with most critics. I'll put it the way I did when I suggested this movie to a friend. The Substance is a movie that's not afraid to get crazy. A more mainstream, big studio-funded horror film would not get so weird or go to the lengths this movie does to get its point across in such a memorable way. There is some criticism that The Substance isn't subtle enough, that maybe it hits you over the head in some scenes so that the viewer has no choice but to understand the message.
What did you do? You seem even more beautiful than before.
I do agree with the fact that in many movies, this would be a flaw. You never want the film to talk down to the audience, or at least have the audience feel that way, since it makes it seem like the writers think the viewers might not be media literate enough to understand the plot or overall theme. But I will give you this example as a reason why being overt in some of the messaging works in the film, for at least the most part. I feel like it's a rather objective thing to say that Demi Moore has always been beautiful as far as we've known her. So it's natural for many viewers who watch this movie to say, I mean, come on, she doesn't need the substance. Even at middle age, it's Demi Moore.
You're still the most beautiful girl in the whole wide world.
I've seen this pointed out online and directly encountered this while watching the movie with a friend. Some of the viewers couldn't comprehend the protagonist needing to take this drug. Well, That's literally the point. You could be the most attractive woman, but society has instilled in us that we simply lose value as we age, that we peak in our 20s and will never be as good or desired as we were in our quote-unquote prime. It's further highlighted through the camera's intense close-ups on the face and body. This shows how Elizabeth feels every day, like someone is looking at her with a magnifying glass to find any flaws. The focus on butts, well, that represents the male gaze and objectification of the female body, showing how women are seemingly desired more when they are younger. As a woman who's watched this movie, I never really found the way they laid things out patronizing. Like when she sees another substance user in a restaurant, it's definitely hitting us over the head with how obvious they are making it. But Elizabeth reacts in a way of almost disbelief and denial.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
It's clear to us, but she doesn't want to believe it. She doesn't want to believe that that's what she looks like when she's Elizabeth, or the treatment only gets worse from here. Part of the craziness of the substance that sets it apart in a good way is, of course, the body horror. It is utilized to the fullest here, despite being a very polarizing thing to include in a film. I'm going to get in some spoilers here, so just be warned and go to this timestamp if you want to skip them. The substance goes on full blast, literally during the last 30 minutes. It's shocking, it's horrifying, but most importantly, it's effective. The obsession over looks and abuse of their bodies have come to a head and resulted in deeply disturbing consequences. Not only does Elizabeth/Sue look objectively ugly and monstrous in the end, their body is literally falling apart from lack of self-care. They have to reap what they've sown, as what is done cannot be undone. Similar to the way we talk about cosmetic surgery in real life and how your face and body are never the same once you start manually changing it. Elizabeth was told to respect the balance of her new and old body, but that is not what she did, as she separated what she felt on the inside, represented by Elizabeth, from what she looked like on the outside, represented by Sue. They don't take their own advice of taking care of themselves, like I mentioned earlier. That advice is mainly interpreted at face value as just taking care of their original body, but it's also their mental health that is not taken care of. The monstro version of Elizabeth is a visual representation of the harm she put her body and mind through in the runtime of this film. Throughout the movie, there is this great conflict bubbling up within her. Who she is on the inside conflicts with how she views herself, how others view her, and who she wants to be viewed as. She has become a gross amalgamation of these different people, someone who no longer knows who they truly are. But at the same time, after this mutation occurs, something even more interesting happens. Elizabeth starts to accept the way she looks. She does her hair and makeup and puts on some jewelry. Yeah, it's kinda silly, but also a bit familiar feeling, and sad at the same time as she tries to work with what she's got. She adds a mask of a picture of her original self, showcasing that that's who she wants everyone to view herself as, and proceeds to tell everyone to accept her as Elizabeth. Afterwards, in the very, very end, Elizabeth is alone, with just herself. No one is judging her face or her body. There's not even a mirror for her to look into, as we've seen her judging her reflection obsessively throughout the film. Her soul is now fully free from the prison that was her body, and it is here where she truly finally starts to accept herself and realizes she is where she belongs. She is Elizabeth Sparkle, a star in her own eyes, and that's all that matters to her now. She can now love herself now that she's free from the opinion of others. When we think about how much society covets youth and beauty, we really think about how others will treat us if we don't score well on those scales. We clearly see that happen here in the movie, with people treating Elizabeth badly and praising Sue. But it's also about how we treat ourselves. We start believing that those traits determine our value and begin hating how we look, even though it's natural and human for us to age. If we give in to these negative comments, we can become our own villain, a danger to ourselves mentally and physically. Elizabeth and Sue are the epitome of the stress we place on women to stay young and conventionally beautiful. Would I say the intensity and at times ridiculousness of this film takes away from the overall message? Nope. Sure, the substance hammers in its themes, and there is some dialogue that is a little too direct, but the tone throughout works with it, as the film teeters between black comedy and horror that's steeped in uneasiness, all rooted in uncomfortable truths ingrained in our society. The body horror is indeed a lot for one to take in, but that's why it's there. It's meant to make you wince and gag, not only for shock value, but as a way to drive the message home. We tweak our bodies to fit what we think others will like, but sometimes that just makes us unrecognizable to even ourselves. It's so easy for us to lose ourselves under all the modifications and abuse we put our bodies through. The psychological psychological violence is translated into physical gore in the film, and for me it fully works. Even the wildness of it all, there is still layers of meaning to the story, and the unhinged visuals help emphasize it. I think The Substance deserves all the praise it's been getting. The outrageousness of this movie pushed the film to success, and it's honestly a breath of fresh air that's fun and a little traumatizing all at once.